Yo, what is going on, guys? Flashverse here, and welcome back to another video on Arrow. And for today's video, I'll be continuing the series that I started a couple of weeks back. So just in case for those who aren't aware about this series, it's just recently I started rewatching Arrow, and I came up with this series where I take my top 5 favorite episodes of Arrow from most seasons, and I just basically rank them for a video. So today's video, I'll be ranking the top 5 best episodes of Arrow Season 5. So for this series, I've gone over the top 5 best episodes of Arrow Season 1, Season 2, and Season 3. And then for a special, I went over the top 5 worst episodes of Arrow Season 4, since there aren't many good episodes for that season, and I do not consider that a season of Arrow. Now, after this video, I will not be doing the rankings for Season 6 and 7, mainly because not many people care about those seasons as they do for the other seasons. So straight after this video, I will go on to rank my top 5 best episodes of Arrow Season 8, unless you guys want me to do Arrow Season 6 and Season 7, but after the Season 5 video, I will go on to do my Arrow Season 8 one first. Now, Arrow Season 5 for me was my favorite season, if not my second favorite season of Arrow ever. It always changes between Season 5 and Season 8, but this was incredibly hard to choose from, just like my Arrow Season 2 one, because Arrow Season 5 from start to finish was so good. Yes, it had a couple of filler episodes here and there, but honestly, the storyline and the main villain for this season is just so incredible, which makes this season so good. Now, you guys may already know the story for this season, but for those who didn't know, after the god-awful Season 4, I nearly stopped watching this show because it was so bad. Season 4 was so bad. It was at a point where the show looked literally irredeemable because of how bad Season 4 was. But then the Season 5 trailer drops, and I was actually excited because this season looked like it was a huge improvement than the one before. Then the first episode kicks in and I was amazed. I was absolutely shocked with the insane comeback that this show pulled off. The best way to describe it was that Arrow Season 4 was pretty much just a virus that was killing the show, and Season 5 was literally the vaccine to the show. Basically, that's the best way to describe it. And Arrow Season 5 was the show which made Arrow my favorite TV show of all time as well, which is why I'm really excited to do this video. And this is my 8th rewatch of Arrow Season 5 due to how much I like this season. So due to how good this season is, as I said, just like my Season 2 one, this was incredibly hard to choose from, but I believe I was able to rank my personal favorite episodes of Arrow Season 5. So with that being said, let's go over this list, starting with number 5.
You told me the dead don't want anything. Either I'm willing to do whatever is necessary, or I shouldn't be up there at all.
So Arrow Season 5 Episode 1 titled Legacy was the comeback that Arrow made after Season 4. It was an incredible episode of Arrow. As I said before, I was absolutely mind blown with how good this episode was. The action and fight scenes in this episode was so good. I really liked all the fight scenes that this episode had. I also really liked Oliver's change in methods due to Laurel's death, and that, as he mentioned when he held back, people he cared about were at more risk. So then we see Oliver in this season literally return to killing at some points here and there, and him not holding back at all. And the way he just snapped that corrupt cop's neck, it was so cool. It was just such a great shift. And the scene between Oliver and Tobias Church was incredibly well written as well. And the way Oliver just jumped off that building was so sick. The fight scene between Anarchy and Oliver at the start, it was just so good. Not just that, but the debut of Prometheus was just incredible, making this one of the best episodes of Arrow Season 5 with an overall of 9.6 out of 10.
I gave your girlfriend an exclusive.
What did you do to her?
Now, in this episode, a lot of stuff goes down. Oliver finds out the identity of Prometheus, who's obviously Adrian Chase. This then takes the rivalry between Prometheus and the Green Arrow to a whole new level, and it just becomes so intense and so good. The fact that Adrian is always 10 steps ahead of Oliver is just great. The writing and dialogue for this episode was so good. It just had such memorable dialogue. It was so good. Not to mention the fight scenes for this episode was insane as well. The episode cliffhanger with Oliver getting captured by Prometheus as well. It was great. The stakes just became a lot higher after this episode, with Oliver becoming kidnapped and leading into one of the best episodes of Arrow ever, and I'll get to that later on in this list. But for this episode, I will give an overall of a 9.8 out of 10.
I know everything. Who you love, who you trust, who you've hurt.
Now, this episode, Arrow Season 5, Episode 9, titled What We Leave Behind, was the mid-season finale of Arrow Season 5, and once again, it was so good. It just has such an incredible dark tone. The fight scenes once again in this episode was so good. I really like how in this episode, Prometheus just goes and hunts down most members of Team Arrow and just goes after them. So in the case of this episode, he goes after Curtis, and it was just so cool to see. The flashbacks with the connections back to season 1 was incredibly well handled, like how Oliver killed Prometheus's father and like just how all of that stuff worked out. It was so good. Prometheus, once again, I'm saying it again, he's such a great villain. The writing for this episode was great as well, and I just loved how manipulative Prometheus was in this episode and how he framed Oliver into killing Billy Malone and seeing Oliver's guilt with that. And I just love the contrast where Oliver feels guilty when he accidentally killed Billy Malone, and then in the flashbacks where Diggle is trying to talk Oliver into to stop killing. It was just great. This episode, as I said, it was so good. Now, the first time I saw this episode, I really loved the Laurel cliffhanger. I was so interested at the end, but seeing it again, this was a great way to bring Katie Cassidy back and how they can fix the mistake that they did with an even better version of the character. And it took us almost 2 seasons to redeem this character, but now looking back at her, she was way better than the original Laurel. So although Laurel's death was something that should not have happened at all, in the other hand, this version of the character is a lot better in the same time. And I will give this episode an overall score of a 9.9 out of 10.
Confess your secret, Oliver, and all this ends. I'm gonna kill you.
Now, the 7 times I rewatched this season, this episode, Arrow Season 5, Episode 17, titled Capuchon, was always number 1 for me. But this time, the 8th time watching this season, I put this in 2nd place. Arrow Season 5, Episode 17, titled Capuchon, for me was just incredibly intense and just perfect. This episode is literally just Adrian torturing Oliver to get him to confess the very thing he was afraid of to say to everyone else, and it was just so cool. The writing for this episode was incredible. The flashbacks with Capuchon and the Bratva taking out Kovar and his men, it was so good. And one thing I really loved was how the flashbacks built up to the moment of present day, where we see that monster inside of Oliver, and that obviously is what Adrian was alluding to with getting Oliver to confess the very secret he was afraid of telling everyone. The fight scene between Kovar and Oliver was so sick as well. And the main reason to why that is because both actors do their own stunts, so it looked a lot better than most of the other fight scenes. Now, the acting and interactions between Stephen Amell as Oliver Queen and Josh Segarra as Adrian Chase was great. The build up to that moment just gave me chills every time I see this episode, where it gets to a point where Oliver just officially breaks. He just confesses to Adrian that he didn't kill people because he had to, but more so he enjoyed killing. That's why he killed those people when he used to be a serial killer back in season 1. So that whole scene, it was by far the best scene of Arrow ever. It was so good. The way Oliver just says, "because I wanted to," so calmly, but then he explodes saying, "I wanted to and I liked it." Just, this scene was incredible. Stephen Amell just nailed that scene. It's definitely one of, if not his best acted scene ever, and it was definitely, for me at least, the best scene in the entire Arrowverse. Overall, this episode is just perfect with an overall of a 10 out of 10. However, I don't think it's better than number 1.
Hello, Oliver. If you want to get your son back, you know what you have to do. I have no interest in this being a fair fight.
Now, this episode, Arrow Season 5, Episode 23, titled Lian U, is obviously the season finale of Arrow Season 5, and it delivered such an amazing and just such a perfect episode. This episode just stuck the landing in a way no one ever expected this episode to go. In this episode, we had Oliver teaming up with various people returning, such as Malcolm Merlyn, Nyssa Al Ghul, Captain Boomerang, and Slade Wilson, to help free his son and his friends, and obviously to stop Adrian Chase and his team as well. And just what an incredible team up. I always love it when Slade and Oliver interact with each other, and the fact that in this episode they become friends again is something that I absolutely loved. This episode was so intense, the writing was incredible, and the fight scenes were just great as well. I love the scene between Team Arrow versus Team Prometheus, and then leading to a 1v1 between Adrian and Oliver, and Adrian trying to manipulate Oliver into killing him. I absolutely loved it all. The flashbacks were also officially the final scenes of the Oliver's 5th year in the island before he gets rescued. It just gives us all the unanswered questions back in season 1. So why was he running to get to that boat and stuff like that? This episode answers it all. I think it played out really, really well. The scene between Oliver and Kovar as well, the fight scene between him, it was just great. I absolutely loved it. It was just so intense as well. This episode had such an emotional scene between Moira and Oliver as well, when Oliver gets to the boat and he calls his mother. It was such a great scene. But the final scene between Adrian Chase and Oliver Queen was incredibly intense, where Adrian had William hostage and he gave Oliver a choice to either save his son or all his friends. And then obviously Oliver finds a way to save his son, but then Adrian ends up killing himself, leading to the Lian U explosion. It was just such a perfect cliffhanger for a season finale. The first time watching this, I had to wait like 5 months to see what happened, and although it didn't deliver pretty well in season 6, this cliffhanger, it was just awesome. But this episode was just perfect, and I'll give it again an overall of a 10 out of 10. Also making this the best episode of Arrow Season 5 and one of the best Arrowverse episodes ever. I think some of the Season 8 episodes are better than this one, and I'll get to that in my Season 8 ranking. But yeah guys, thanks for watching. If you guys have enjoyed the video, please give a like and subscribe. Tell me in the comment section down below what you guys think about my rankings, and also be sure to tell me your ranking in the comment section down below. And yeah, I will see you guys in my next video.